Welcome back. We start from the US, which has condemned religious and state violence in protests against the controversial citizenship law in India. 25 people have died in violent demonstrations across the country. US Commission on International Religious Freedom called on New Delhi to stop the use of force on demonstrators. Meanwhile, the Human Rights Watch also criticized the Indian government's use of brutal force. In a report, the rights body said all the deaths have occurred in states ruled by the Bharatiya Janata Party. In a related development, scores of people have protested against India's controversial citizenship law in South Africa. The protest was held outside India's Consulate General in Johannesburg. Demonstration organizers said their aim is to show solidarity with protesters in India. They said they are pleased to register outrage against New Delhi's right-wing Hindutva agenda. Protesters appealed to South Africa's ruling African National Congress-led government to break its silence on India's atrocities and killings. In another development, the Human Rights Commission of the OIC urges India to repeal the controversial citizenship law that grants nationality to non-Muslim immigrants. In a statement, the Commission condemned the crackdown on peaceful protesters against the law in India. It says the revocation of occupied Kashmir's special status and decision in Babri Mosque case are an attempt to subjugate Muslims. The Commission urged the UN to pressurize India to protect fundamental rights of Muslims in India. Meanwhile, New Delhi is cutting off internet services in various parts of India as protests against this controversial citizenship bill continue. This is one of the BJP government's favorite techniques, with authorities ordering providers to suspend services 95 times this year. But the situation is worse in Indian-occupied Kashmir, which has had no internet since August 5th. This report will tell you more.
The people of the occupied Kashmir were transported decades into the past when India scrapped the valley's special status as a disputed territory. There are virtually no internet services for ordinary people, and the economy has suffered as a consequence. The valley has already lost 100,000 jobs and suffered $1.7 billion in economic losses.
Honestly speaking, we haven't made a single penny for the last 4 or 5 months, and the situation is very bad in terms of our business, and we don't see any hope right now. It's complete hopeless situation we are in right now.
The only relief New Delhi has allowed the Kashmiri people are these internet kiosks. There are about a dozen of them in the valley, which has 7 million inhabitants. One person can only use the kiosk 10 to 15 minutes at a time, and accessing social media sites is prohibited.
We are here for the scholarship scheme here, and the difficulties are the net is very slow, and sometimes net is not working, and that's why I'm pleasing Government of India to restore the internet blockade in Kashmir.
After the passing of the Citizenship Amendment Bill, New Delhi has also cut off services in Assam and West Bengal. But protests against the new law have only gained momentum. It remains to be seen now if the BJP will listen to the will of the people or crack down on them harder.
Moving on, Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa says there will never be a compromise on Kashmir at any cost. Speaking to troops at the line of control, General Bajwa said Pakistan's quest for peace must never be misconstrued as weakness. He added that the army is prepared to take any thwart misadventure from India. Tensions between Pakistan and India have increased after New Delhi stripped occupied Kashmir of its special status on the 5th of August. Seven Afghan soldiers have been killed in a Taliban attack in northern Balkh province. The Defense Ministry says 6 security officers, including 3 intelligence personnel, were wounded in the attack. The ministry said the attack was launched at a joint military base of Afghan forces and intelligence agency, the National Directorate of Security. It said the incident occurred in the Khalil Guli area of Balkh's Dawalatbad district. The Taliban are yet to comment on the incident. This month marks 40 years since the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. The conflict ended poorly for both countries, accelerating the decline of the USSR and sparking a civil war in Afghanistan that continues to this day. This report has more.
The Soviets pulled out of this country in 1989, but their destroyed tanks are still scattered across the Afghan landscape. Armed using American funds, the Afghan people and volunteers from across the Muslim world waged a bloody insurgency against Russian occupation. 14,000 Soviet troops were killed before the Kremlin finally took its soldiers back home.
Yes, it was difficult, and yes, it's true that at least 40% of people who fought in Afghanistan are no longer alive, but that's life. Any war for anyone who took part in it is hard.
But for Afghans, the consequences were even more tragic. 2 million were killed in the war and 7 million forced to flee the country. By the 1990s, the country was in a state of civil war, which eventually brought the Taliban to power.
I always thought that what we were doing was necessary. Even being an 18-year-old guy, I realized that such a big country, a superpower, had to control what happens in its underbelly.
40 years after the Soviet invasion, Afghanistan still isn't at peace. And with the US preparing to pull out of the country, there are fears the country may descend into another civil war.
More in this bulletin. Iran has unveiled new operations at its Arak heavy water nuclear reactor, countering US sanctions pressure. The development does not violate the 2015 nuclear deal, but it takes Tehran's program closer to weapons-grade levels. State media said technicians switched on the secondary circuit at Arak. Iran's nuclear agency head Ali Akbar Salehi said the secondary circuit transfers heat to cooling system of the reactor. He said the entire reactor system will go online in 2021. Tehran has been reactivating parts of its nuclear program in protest at the US withdrawal last year. Now moving on to France, which says it has carried out its first armed drone strike, killing 7 militants in central Mali. The deployment comes nearly 1 month after 2 French helicopters collided in Mali, killing 13 soldiers. France has joined a tiny group of countries that use armed drones, including the United States. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said the drone attack was part of operations in Mali that killed 40 terrorists. It said the strike targeted militants in the Ouagadougou forest. The ministry said French commandos were attacked when they were patrolling the combat zone. French train and metro drivers continue to strike for the 20th straight day in a standoff with the government over pension reform. The strike is causing trouble for people over Christmas plans, with many unable to reach their loved ones. The strike, which began on 5th December, has hit daily commuters hard, especially around Paris. It is now impending tens of thousands of ticket holders who have planned to spend the holiday season with family and friends. The train operator union has issued a warning that traffic will be severely disrupted over the festive period. Earlier, talks between the government and unions failed to find a middle ground for the holiday truce. There will be no Christmas Mass at Paris's Notre Dame Cathedral, which was gutted by a fire in April this year. The last time Mass was cancelled at the iconic medieval cathedral was in the year 1803. More in this report.
Parisians will observe Mass at the Saint Germain-l'Auxerrois Church this year. Meanwhile, Notre Dame's rector, Archpriest Patrick Chauvet, has given French Catholics assurances that the cathedral will be open to the public soon.
For every believer of Notre Dame's, I think it will be a sign of hope to say, let's be patient, let's wait. The Virgin Mary waited for the birth of her son. We are waiting for the rebirth of the cathedral.
For now, the cathedral remains buried under its melted scaffolding. Removing it will require a special crane, which is currently being assembled.
We need to try and remove the scaffolding. This is the difficult part. It weighs several tons, so we have to make sure it does not fall on the vaults that were not damaged.
Once assembled, the crane will measure 80 meters, but it's unlikely the cathedral will be fit to host next year's Christmas Mass either.
We now move on to the U.S., whose Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says Republicans have not ruled out calling witnesses in the upcoming impeachment trial. The Kentucky Republican earlier suggested to quickly acquit U.S. President Donald Trump of the 2 articles of impeachment. Last week, McConnell rejected Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer's request to call 4 witnesses for the Senate trial. The proposed witnesses include acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney and former National Security Advisor John Bolton.
My colleague wants a special pre-trial guarantee of certain witnesses whom the House Democrats themselves did not bother to pursue as they assemble their case. Or he wants to proceed without giving any organizational resolution whatsoever. So, as I said, we remain at an impasse on these logistics.
In Chile, President Sebastián Piñera has enacted a law that will allow the country to hold a referendum on 26 April to change the Pinochet-era constitution. Changing the constitution was one of Piñera's main promises in a bid to end 2 months of protests against his government. It was enacted under former dictator Augusto Pinochet. President Piñera said this reform opens the doors and defines a path to achieve a great constitutional agreement. In Libya, Khalifa Haftar's forces have released a seized vessel with Turkey's crew members in the Mediterranean Sea. Libyan National Army spokesman Ahmad al-Masmari said the vessel was seized as it entered Libya's territorial waters without prior permission. Masmari said they did not find any weapons on the vessel flying with a Grenada flag. He said the vessel was carrying a shipment of flour from Malta to the Egyptian coastal city of Alexandria. The vessel seizure came amid tensions between the LNA and Turkey, which backs Libya's government of national accord. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. In Indonesia, 25 people died after a bus plunged into a ravine in South Sumatra province. Police say 14 others were injured in the incident that took place just before midnight. The bus was carrying dozens of passengers when it careered into the 150-meter ravine. Police said the accident happened in a remote and steep area near the town of Pagar Alam. Rescue officials warned that the toll may rise as some people are still trapped inside the bus. They said search teams have been deployed to look for more victims. In Syria, a car bomb kills 5 people and wounds several others in Raqqa. Earlier, 9 people were killed in Russian airstrikes in the rebel-held area of Idlib. Intensified bombardment by government and Russian warplanes have forced tens of thousands to flee Idlib. The United Nations has called for de-escalation and warned of further mass displacement if the violence continues. A war monitor said 170 combatants have been killed since Thursday. Idlib is the last major stronghold of rebels fighting government forces since 2015. In the United States, 3 people have died in 4 separate shootings in Baltimore over the weekend. Local media says another 14 people were injured in various shootings in the same city. Police said one of the shootings involved 2 unidentified suspects with a rifle and a handgun. It said the suspects opened fire at a group of people lining up outside the Ivilla Hookah Lounge at Park Avenue in downtown Baltimore. In another incident, a woman was shot dead in the afternoon in a downtown grocery. In a tweet, Baltimore's Mayor Bernard Young said the level of violence is completely unacceptable. He said the police will work non-stop to identify suspects and bring the shooters to justice. China says the newly created U.S. Space Force is a direct threat to peace and security in the outer space. Foreign Ministry spokesman Geng Shuang said China is deeply concerned about resolutely opposed to it. At the weekly news briefing, the ministry said the relevant U.S. actions are a serious violation of international consensus on the peaceful use of outer space. U.S. President Donald Trump signed the 2020 National Defense Authorization Act into law on Friday. Air Force Secretary Barbara Barrett said the space capacities of the U.S. should be enhanced as China and Russia pose a growing threat. The 2019 Wings for Love Wingsuit Flying World Cup concluded its three-day trial event in southwest China's Yunnan province. The $14,000 prize money will be donated to a special education school. Watch this report.
Australian flyer Scotty Patterson claimed the title. French player Vincent Cote won second place and American wingsuit pilot Patrick Walker finished third. All three have qualified for the final to be held in 2020.
It went okay, hit the middle of the target, so yeah, I'm pretty happy with that.
A total of 14 daredevils from 10 countries jumped from a helicopter at the height of 2,000 meters. They performed jaw-dropping stunts in the air before flying through two hot air balloons up 200 meters above the ground.
And it was actually perfect. It was beautiful up there. Didn't have a lot of time to go set up for a perfect landing, but it was still great.
Set up in 2014, the Wings for Love World Cup is the biggest international wingsuit flying competition of its kind. It is its tradition to donate the prize money to impoverished local children.
In Russia, Moscow has hosted a unique fashion show for elderly ladies. It features radiant 50-plus grannies hitting the catwalk and obviously having a lot of fun doing it. More about the show in this report.
For a serious fashion city like Moscow, this mature beauty fashion show is a light-hearted change of tone. Embracing their grey hair and wrinkles, Russian grannies walk the ramp with style and pride. One of the participants, Tatiana Fresher-Egorova, said aging can be attractive too.
What did the grannies do 20 years ago? Eating seeds, sitting on a bench, grandchildren, dacha, and that is all. But here these grannies moving like queens in fancy outfits. Agree with me. Aging is much more attractive. For many, this is hope for the future.
Beginning in 2014, the fashion show has grown year on year and intends to help the elderly feel more comfortable in their skin. It gives spectators different perspectives on things that one can do when getting old.
After many years of work, now we are free from work and cares. Now we are living to the fullest. This is one of the events which is for us, at least for me, an emotional explosion, emotional pleasure. That is what I have always been enjoying.
Organized by an elderly-oriented website, the fashion show enjoys support from various Russian charity organizations.
The International Monetary Fund has said India is in the midst of a significant economic slowdown. In its annual review, IMF said declining consumption and investment and falling tax revenue have exerted pressure on India's growth engine. IMF called for an urgent action to address the current downturn. The fund warned the government has limited space to boost spending to support growth, give high debt levels and interest payments. India's economy grew at 4.5% in the third quarter, down from 7% a year ago. American airplane maker Boeing has fired its chief executive officer, Dennis Muilenburg. The decision follows a year of intense scrutiny and industrial setbacks set off by twin fatal crashes of its 737 MAX jetliner. In a press release, Boeing said that its board of directors decided to part ways with Muilenburg. Chairman David Calhoun will take over as CEO with effect from January 13th. The company said a change in leadership was necessary to restore relationships with all stakeholders. Boeing 737 MAX was grounded worldwide in March 2019 after two fatal crashes killed 346 people. It was the company's best-selling commercial jet. Asian stock markets are trading mixed ahead of holiday season. Investor interest slowed down despite optimism over a Phase 1 trade deal between the US and China that will boost exports and corporate earnings. Seoul's Kospi is trading 0.5% lower as LG Display shares slipped over 2%. The Shanghai Composite gained nearly 0.5% over China's announcement to cut import tariffs on a wide range of US goods. Hong Kong's Hang Seng has lost a fraction as Sunny Optical stocks declined fractionally. Tokyo's Nikkei 225 is trading flat. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.